All right, we're gonna pause the stream for a minute because I gotta answer Rack's question. This is gonna turn into a bit of a rant for a few minutes. So, welcome to my book talk, Rhinak. Um, so Rhinak just asked a question over on Twitch. It says, I only recently discovered you on YouTube, and it's clear you love fantasy. Are you a fan of fantasy books, and if so, which ones? So, many years ago, story time. Before the advent of the internet, all I did was read and collect books. Um, by 2007, I had about 1,200 books in my collection. But when the economy went poop, I shut my construction company down. I sold all my tools, sold my truck, and I started traveling full time. And I sold a huge portion of my library because you can't take it with you. I gave about 400 books away to my local library. I've kept about 200 of my rares at my sister's place up in Colorado, and then the rest I sold. But I still have all my I've got a huge Roger Zelazny collection. I have like a really nice John Carter of Mars set that took me forever to get, but it's the Michael Whelan covers in like mint condition. I've got the original first edition Wheel of Time books all in hardcover. Just a whole bunch of that kind of stuff I've kept. Books were all I did for a long time. All I ever wanted to do was be a writer. Flash forward to 2008 after I sold my construction company and I started writing for a living. And between 2008 and essentially 2018, I published around 20 million words in print, just pursuing a career as a writer. That was my primary day job, was as a writer. But mostly in the travel writing space. Chris and I were influencers in the travel industry for a long time. We public speakers, travel around the world, work on guidebooks and travel guides and articles and all sorts of stuff, but always dabbling in science fiction and fantasy in the side. If you have not seen me recommend him yet on my channel, one of the long-time community members I've known him since 2014. His name's Liam. He has a channel called Liam's Lyceum on YouTube. He's also his Hemvar in our Discord channel, and I promote his channel on YouTube from time to time. He has a booktube channel, and he and I have gone back and forth for years because he knows me because of my fantasy writing. So he got involved when I was the creative director on the Saga of Leucemia, which was an MMORPG that I was building with a company that I founded based on my IP, which was a world that I created way back in the day. It was a tabletop world first, then it became a play-by-post world, then it became a novel series and sold a bunch of short stories. Then I took that IP and I created an MMORPG with it. And then that, for various reasons that I can't talk about for legal reasons, the team members that I hired to work on that MMORPG decided that they wanted to go in a different direction. And that MMORPG became Embers Adrift, which is an MMORPG that's currently out today. It's an indie MMORPG. It is... I could talk about it, but I can't because of legal reasons. So then my brother and I started working on The Weave in the Void with my wife. And that's the project we worked on for the past I guess we're coming up on a 3-year anniversary in March. So our Patreon page for The Weave in the Void, if you notice, our Discord is called the Wandering Hermits Discord. The company actually owns the Discord. And there's a huge section in our Discord dedicated to The Weave in the Void. So The Weave in the Void is our project, which is a tabletop world. It's a tabletop game. The module and the source book came out. The first module and the source book came out in May of 2022. The book series I wrote in serialized format, or at least the first novel, chapter by chapter in serialized format on the Patreon page. And then that was finished up earlier in 2023. I'm currently working with an artist to do the book cover, and I actually got the third draft back yesterday. I haven't checked my mail this morning. I probably need to check my mail. Yesterday I got a draft back from the artist working on the cover. I'm gonna check my mail while we're sitting here. And so that book it's available to Patreon supporters to read in all of its glory in first draft format. But now that the cover's about to get done, I'm going to get that edited up, and we'll probably get that published for the masses. Oh, yep, I do have an art. Hang on, while we're sitting here, I have an update from the artist. Yeah, I'll need to give her feedback on that, but that's looking pretty good. So that book will be out maybe by Christmas. I'm going to see if I can't get a revision done before Christmas time, now that I've got the cover art pretty much done. Looks like the artist I need to look at this piece of art later and give her some feedback. Um, so yes, the short version is I have been a huge science fiction and fantasy nerd over the years. That's all I used to do before the internet was just consume voraciously books, and that's all I ever wanted to do was become a writer. And I was able to pursue that dream, and I still do it, although it's not my full-time thing. Um, I used that to move into game development, and then I've been a writer on lots of game projects over the years. And I've written. I have a fantasy and science fiction anthology that's available on Amazon. I don't promote it. But it's there. I don't even have links to it anywhere anymore. I used to have links to it on my YouTube, and I probably should promote it more, but it's not something that I need to promote. It's just something I did. It's like there was a chapter of my life where all I did was work on fantasy and science fiction, short stories and novel stuff. I did it. I made money at it. Um, I'm a very unique person in that I tend to do things. I realized this a few weeks ago. I was like, everything I've done in my life is you can kind of sort it into like chapters by decade. I did this for a decade, I did that for a decade, I did that for a decade, and by the time I've done something for a decade, I kind of get bored, and I have to move on and find something else that I want to do for the next decade. So the most recent thing was game development for a decade. Before that was science fiction, fantasy, and writing for a decade. Before that, I had a construction company. Before that, I was still a teenager. Now I'm in the decade of I'm a full-time content creator on YouTube and starting to stream full-time. I'm technically 2 years into this career. Um, I pivoted from game development into this, and I still do game dev on the side, but it's not something that I'm not doing full-time anymore. We spent 7 years on the MMORPG, and then about 3 years on our side project. Oh, and the other project I was just talking about, The Weave in the Void, it's a source book, tabletop, novel, and a point-and-click adventure game. So the point-and-click adventure game is still in the works. My brother's dabbling on that. So it's like the old King's Quest, Quest for Glory games, stuff like that. So I kind of pivoted away from game development over the last couple of years into doing this full time. And so now I do YouTube full time. YouTube is my day job. And then streaming. I've always done streaming for the past couple of years, but it's been very haphazard. Once Twitch announced that they were going to allow us to do multi-streaming, I decided to pursue streaming as a scheduled thing. So I do the streams in the morning from 5:30 to 7:30 a.m. Central, and then I do the night streams from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. ish. Last night I started early, ended early. I started at like 7:15 and ended at like 9:30 because I was just tired. But in a nutshell, yes, I love fantasy, and I could talk for days and days and days. I used to do on my Patreon page years ago. I used to do like a book club where we're reading through some of my old favorites, fantasy and science fiction. Um, but oh yeah, that's been a before I was anything, before I did anything. I was homeschooled for like 6 years on a dairy farm in the middle of Missouri, and my parents were a little bit of religious nut jobs. And homeschooled me for the wrong reasons. They homeschooled me because the world is evil and our children need to be protected. And as a result, the only thing I was really allowed to do was read. And so my mom would take us to the library like once a week, and I would just fill up a bag, like a big one of those old. They used to give them at the grocery store, the old brown paper bags, like the grocery bags. And I would just fill up a bag with like 12, 15 books, and I would read 12 or 15 books every week. I mean, I would go through a book in a day. I would just sit there. Anytime I wasn't doing chores or doing schoolwork, I would just read. So this is pre-internet, pre-cell phones, in the 80s and 90s, early 90s. I remember when I first discovered the Wheel of Time. I think I was 13 or 14, and I read Out of Order. I remember I'll never forget this. I remember being at the library, just going through and like picking fantasy books off the shelves, and I remember seeing the spine of The Dragon Reborn, which is the third book in the series, and that head figure, and then the sword on the cover, and I was like, oh my god, this looks amazing. And I remember reading that book and just becoming obsessed. I read The Lord of the Rings when I read The Hobbit when I was 5. I read Narnia when I was 6, and I read The Lord of the Rings when I was 7, and just that that's history. The rest is history. So yeah, I do have a deep, deep passion for fantasy and sci-fi books. I don't read nearly as much as I used to though, because now I play video games. And I find that Chris and I watch a lot of TV shows, and I've talked about this elsewhere. I have a series on my channel which I haven't updated in a few months. I have a series here on YouTube called my favorite science fiction and fantasy series of all time. And so I go back and I review some of my favorite shows that I've watched, and I very much appreciate the storytelling medium that's evolved because of streaming. Because I really love these like 8 to 12 episode seasons that we get, where it's a very tight narrative. So, watching TV shows with Chris is something I really enjoy, and that's kind of replaced reading for me. I do still read. I was doing podcasts around Middle Earth and Dune on my channel, but I've retired those as of last week. But I do have on my Kindle right now. I'm working my way through the Dune trilogy right now because I haven't read those in 20 years, and I think I'm gonna work on either The Expanse next because I haven't read the Expanse novels, but I loved the show. I also wouldn't mind reading. Um, Fuck, the Netflix did a series around it. Altered Carbon is the name of the show. The show is amazing, and I really want to read those books. And so I've got like the Expanse novels are on my list. The Altered Carbon books are on my list. Um, what was the other one I was thinking of reading? Oh, gosh darn it. Netflix has a series coming out. It's based on a Chinese novel series, and Tencent already did a TV show around it, but it's a Chinese TV show. And Netflix is doing their, is the Zero Body Problem or the Zero Three Problem? I forget what the name of it is, but there's supposedly a book series around that that I want to watch as well. And once I watch the show, I'll decide if I want to read that book series or not. But the book series sounded really, really good. So I do still have a passion for books, but it's not something I do. It's not my primary thing anymore. Um, More than likely, what's going to happen is that whenever I finish up with this chapter, which is the YouTube chapter, um, I've talked about this for our members on YouTube because I do member videos 2 or 3 times a week for our channel members over there. The short version is that I'm doing YouTube because I love playing video games, and it's easy for me to do content creation because I'm a good public speaker. I don't have a problem being in front of the camera. I got paid to be a public speaker for about 7 years, get up in front of people and do big presentations. I've done a few keynotes. Um, but YouTube is just a means to an end for me. Um, we paid in cash. We bought our homestead 3 years ago, I guess. No, 2 years ago. October 2021 was when we bought it. So October 2023 was the second year. And we moved here in March, essentially, of last year, February, mid-February. But this place is paid for, and so I have no bills other than food and groceries and whatever. So everything I make with YouTube just goes into the savings, and we're expanding big time. The big thing is I'm shooting for partner on Twitch now, and I'm gonna probably I'd like to hire a full-time assistant next year to help with everything, and then that's all going towards us buying another property up in the mountains. And in the back of my mind, the the tertiary objective to all of this is that once we have our mountain retreat purchased and built, I'm trying to get all that done by the time I'm 50. I'll be 44 in January. So assuming my health stays good and everything else, and then if I can get a decade of a career out of YouTube. I like to look at what Co Carnage has done. I really appreciate that. Asmongold too, but Asmongold's a little over the top sometimes. So I really like the way Co Carnage has done it. I'm only 2 years into doing YouTube and streaming full time, so I did it for a couple of years part time before that. So if I can look at this as, I'm 2 years into this, what's the next 6 years going to bring? That'll give me a full decade in terms of totality of time invested. The objective is to buy a property up in the mountains, have that completely paid off as well, and then hopefully retire. And all I'm going to do from the time I'm 50 onwards is just go back to writing books. And I'll probably just do that for the rest of my life. And that's all she wrote. No pun intended. Fluffy says, They're all actually connected, even though they're totally separate planets. Bam says, I love Brandon Sanderson. Three Body Problem is the one I'm thinking of. Thank you, guys. Brandon Sanderson is good. He's, I personally think he's a little overhyped. But I follow him on social media. He's great on TikTok. He is a brilliant writer. He really is very, very good. He has some tropes, but every writer has tropes. I always love looking at Robert Jordan because as much as I love Robert Jordan, the hair pulling thing was a trope. But it's funny because people always like to say that there's this, that, or the other that they didn't like about Wheel of Time and how Robert Jordan has these problems because of this. I'm like, you've never read Robert Jordan then. Because if you've read all of Robert Jordan's other works, if you've ever read his Conan novels or his Western novels, any of the other books that Robert Jordan wrote as a writer, you'll see that the things he did in the Wheel of Time were very specific and planned. And he doesn't have those tropes and things in his other books. So it's very interesting when I see those kind of things cropping up. But I'm very happy that Harriet picked Brandon as well because he was the right person to finish the Wheel of Time. And he's done very good stuff. I really like the Mistborn series. It was good. It was not as good as a lot of people told me it was going to be. I thought it was very good. But I ended up skim reading about 60% of the combat shit because it was just pages and pages and pages of Vin jumping around. And it's just like, dude, I get it. She has powers, but I don't need like a full-on Marvel's Avengers fight scene every other chapter. Like, outside of the combat stuff, the Mistborn series was freaking amazing. Especially the earring thing, the reveal on that at the end of the series was like, oh shit, for real. Like that was very well done. Yeah, he writes PG-13. He writes sugary sweet young adult fiction. And that's great, but I like George R.R. Martin. I like dark. I like gritty. I like, I want realistic. I want more R-rated. I don't mind some PG-13. Yeah, I think everyone agrees, Reinach, that Robert Jordan could have eliminated like 4 books right out of the middle, and it would have been much better for it. So that's the storytime rant that you got out of me. Here this morning during the World of Warcraft stream. Yes, I love fantasy and science fiction. I've probably forgot more books over the years than remember because I used to read so much.
I can't attack that.
I always recommend people to go read like Tad Williams. Just go read Tad Williams. Read the Memory Star and Thorn series. Then go read the Otherland series. Then go read the Shadow... What's it called? The other series he did. I forget the name of it now. Tad Williams is a great author. You'll love everything you ever read by him. Raymond Feist, you're going to love everything you read by Ray Feist. Michael Stackpole, you're going to love everything you read by Michael Stackpole. Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, as much as they're known for Dragonlance, go read their other shit. The Deathgate Cycle is, holy shit, the Deathgate Cycle is so good. Shadow March, that's the other one I'm thinking of. Thank you, yes. The thing I like about Tad is he does nightly readings on Facebook. He's not very good at tech stuff, but he does nightly readings, and he's a genuinely nice dude. Like,
that's it. I got mouths to feed, pal. Goblin products are built.
Level 50. Ding-a-ling-a-ling.